London, April 2015. Easter weekend had silenced the city's financial arteries. Offices shut, streets emptied, alarms armed. But while the bankers and brokers took holiday, something else stirred in the shadows. On the surface, the men gathering on Hatton Garden's narrow lanes looked unremarkable. Some walked stiffly, stooped with age. Others paused to catch their breath. In another world, you'd mistake them for pensioners on their way home from the pub. But these weren't ordinary retirees. They were the remnants of a generation of thieves. Men who had once cracked safes, stripped armored cars, and haunted the edges of London's underworld. For decades, they'd slipped in and out of crime, some swearing they'd gone straight. And yet, here they were, reunited for one last score. Their target, the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company. A vault buried deep beneath London's jewelry district. Home to millions in diamonds, jewels, and cash. To most, it was impenetrable. To these men, it was the perfect stage for a comeback. The plan was bold, absurd even: drill through concrete, bypass security, and loot hundreds of safety deposit boxes. All without being caught. And perhaps the strangest part? They very nearly succeeded. The seeds of the Hatton Garden job began with Brian Reader, a 76-year-old known as the Master in London's underworld. White-haired, with a frail gait and a reputation for brains over brawn, Reader had already lived through a criminal career that stretched back to the 1983 Brinksmat robbery. But Reader wasn't alone. He assembled a cast of characters that looked more like a retirement home roll call than a heist crew. Terry Perkins, 67, an old burglar with a heart condition. Daniel Jones, 58, wiry, restless, still carrying the cocky edge of youth. John Kenny Collins, 74, a former getaway driver with fading eyesight. And a few younger associates, men in their 40s, brought in for muscle and technical skill. They met in pubs, in quiet cafes, in safe houses scattered across London. Their conversations mixed nostalgia with ambition. They weren't just chasing money, they were chasing relevance. A chance to prove that old dogs still had bite. The target was chosen carefully. Hatton Garden wasn't just another bank. It was the beating heart of London's diamond trade. Inside, safety deposit boxes held untold fortunes, from jewelers storing gems to businessmen hiding cash. Even a few shady dealers keeping secrets off the books. The old men saw opportunity. They also saw risk. But as Brian Reader told them, "We've got one shot left. Let's make it count." Planning the heist wasn't a weekend project. It was months of preparation, each detail studied, rehearsed, memorized. First, the reconnaissance. Members of the gang posed as workmen, scoped out entrances, watched CCTV blind spots, and took note of the security patrol schedules. They learned that Hatton Garden's vault sat beneath a commercial building, shielded by thick concrete walls, multiple doors, and an alarm system. The biggest vulnerability wasn't the vault door. It was the elevator shaft next to it. If they could disable the lift, they could climb down into the basement and drill through the wall that separated the shaft from the vault itself. The tools were sourced carefully. A Hilti industrial diamond drill, heavy-duty crowbars, angle grinders, and bags of cutting discs. Each piece was chosen for strength and silence. The timing was no accident either. Easter weekend meant 4 days of reduced activity, fewer eyes on the building, and delays in alarm responses. But what stood out most wasn't the planning itself. It was the age of the planners. These weren't impulsive smash-and-grab kids. They were men who had lived long enough to know patience. Each step was weighed, every risk calculated. It was, in their eyes, the perfect plan. On Thursday, April 2, 2015, the heist began. Dressed as workmen, the gang entered Hatton Garden's building with tool bags slung casually over their shoulders. They disabled the elevator and descended into the shaft. There, in the silence of the basement, they set to work. The task was brutal. They had to drill through 20 inches of reinforced concrete. The Hilti drill roared to life, its diamond-tipped bit grinding stone into dust. Sparks flew, sweat poured, and hours passed. When they finally broke through, the vault lay before them, a room lined with safety deposit boxes, each one a private treasure chest. They worked methodically, breaking open box after box. Inside were diamonds, gold, jewelry, wads of cash, an estimated 14 million pounds in valuables. They stuffed their bags and containers, loading their haul piece by piece. And then, disaster. One piece of equipment failed. They couldn't open all the boxes they wanted. Frustration simmered, arguments flared. But by dawn, they withdrew, leaving behind a scene of chaos. The vault had been violated. Yet astonishingly, no alarms had triggered a police response. The system had been compromised, and the old men had won their first round. Over Easter weekend, the gang returned to finish the job. They re-entered the vault, pushing deeper, breaking open more boxes. Some members grew reckless, smashing indiscriminately. Others carefully packed gems into cloth bags. The final tally was staggering. Millions in diamonds, gold bullion, jewelry, and cash. Enough to secure every member of the gang for life. But the work was harder than any of them had expected. Their bodies ached, their breathing was heavy. More than once, one of the older men had to sit down, sweat pouring as his heart pounded. Still, they carried on. By the time they left for good, the vault looked ransacked, over 70 boxes emptied. They slipped into the night with their loot, believing they had pulled off the heist of the century. By Tuesday, April 7th, the robbery was discovered. The sight shocked London. Safety deposit holders arrived to find their life savings gone. Jewels passed down for generations vanished overnight. For the jewelers of Hatton Garden, it was a catastrophe. The police investigation, codenamed Operation Turlington, was swift. CCTV footage revealed shadowy figures entering and leaving the building with heavy bags. Despite their disguises, details stood out: the gait of an old man, the shape of a familiar face. The press had a field day. They called it the old men's heist. Tabloids plastered headlines mocking and marveling at the idea of retirees pulling off one of Britain's biggest robberies. For the gang, the pressure was mounting. Some wanted to lay low, others wanted to spend. The loot began to circulate, sparking whispers in the underworld. And then came the greatest weakness of all: betrayal. The old men had trusted each other. But trust is a fragile currency. Some members demanded bigger shares. Others feared they'd be cut out. Voices rose, tempers flared. The camaraderie of the planning phase gave way to paranoia. The police, meanwhile, closed in. Surveillance units tracked their movements. Phones were tapped, cars followed. In May 2015, the hammer fell. Police raided homes and warehouses, recovering bags of gems and stacks of cash. One by one, the old men were arrested. The trial that followed was a spectacle. The defendants looked less like master criminals and more like a group of tired pensioners. Some shuffled into court with canes. Others nodded off during testimony. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The jury convicted them, and the sentences were harsh, up to 7 years in prison. The Hatton Garden job entered legend almost instantly. For some, it was a comedy, old men proving they still had one last job in them. For others, it was a tragedy, greed driving men to ruin at the twilight of their lives. The stolen goods? Not all were recovered. Millions remain missing to this day, fueling speculation that hidden caches of gems still lie buried in lockups, waiting to resurface. For London, the heist was a humiliation. A reminder that even in a city of cameras and security systems, criminals could still breach the heart of its wealth. And for the men themselves? Their legacy was sealed. They became unlikely anti-heroes, folk villains, symbols of audacity. The Hatton Garden job wasn't pulled off by sleek young thieves or high-tech hackers. It was carried out by old men, wrinkled, limping, gasping for air. But for a brief moment, they turned back the clock, breaking into one of the most secure vaults in London. They proved that cunning lasts longer than muscle. But in the end, greed, betrayal, and age caught up with them. The diamonds glittered for a moment, and then faded into dust. Today, their story remains a paradox, part tragedy, part farce, and part legend. The last great job of London's old